Sherlock Holmes is more than just a great detective. He is the exemplar of what a great detective should be.
Thank you.
How could any man compare to this investigative icon? He couldn't.
Splendid.
But maybe an old lady with a gentle manner just might.
We would be foolish, stupid, to ignore any possibility.
We?
Did I say that?
Before we see how the outwardly fluffy pink-cheeked Marple stacks up against Sherlock, let's explore why Sherlock is treated as the standard for investigative excellence.
Lay everything before us which may help us form an opinion upon this matter.
Sherlock Holmes embodies a scientific method of observation and deductive reasoning. It is his primary way of relating to the world around him. To understand Sherlock is to understand his methodology.
Watson!
It all starts with Sherlock's ability to see details everyone else misses. He does this through a systematic approach to observation.
On the contrary, Watson, you can see everything, but you fail to reason from what you see.
For Sherlock, knowledge is ultimately about its application. From fingerprint analysis to ballistics, Conan Doyle employed cutting-edge forensic techniques in Sherlock Holmes stories well before their widespread adoption.
My mind rebels at stagnation. Give me problems. Give me work.
But, more than anything else, Sherlock is most famous for the intellectual pyrotechnics of his deductions. He often chains several seemingly simple inferences together that, when viewed as a whole, result in an incredible, audacious conclusion.
Now confess, you are utterly taken aback.
While chained inferences make for compelling stories, this form of reasoning often doesn't hold up under stricter scrutiny.
That would be jumping to conclusions.
Then, pray, tell me what it is that you can infer from that hat.
That the man is highly intellectual is, of course, obvious. His wife has ceased to love him.
My dear Holmes.
He's out of training entirely. He's middle-aged. It is also highly improbable that he has gas laid on in his house.
Yeah, well, now you are certainly joking.
If only he was joking, my dear Watson.
For example, how do you deduce that the man is intellectual?
A man with so large a head must have something in it.
Sherlock is already way over his skis by determining a man's intelligence from his hat size. This illustrates an important point. Knowledge is not fixed. Phrenology was already discredited by the time this story was written, and it's even more preposterous today. After a number of decidedly dubious deductions about the foresight and stylishness of the hat wearer, Sherlock believes he can also infer the man's level of physical fitness.
Listen, witness the moisture. Obviously a free perspirer, therefore not in the best of training.
Here, Sherlock relies on the premise that the more you sweat, the less in shape you are. But he's wrong. In fact, endurance athletes often sweat earlier and more profusely than those not in the best of training. For the sake of being charitable, we'll ignore Sherlock's conclusions about the correlation between hat brushing frequency and marital happiness.
When I see a man with a week's accumulation of dust upon his hat, I fear that he has been unfortunate enough to lose his wife's affections.
Leaving Watson with only one more question.
How do you deduce that there is no gas laid on in his house?
One tallow candle stain, or even two might come by chance, but when I see Watson, no less than 5. He never got candle stains from a gas jet, Watson. Are you satisfied?
There's a problem here. Hat racks exist. Besides, if the wearer had visited an unfamiliar place lit by candles, he might hold the hat in his hands. But at his own home? Home is where you hang your hat, after all. Of course, the story confirms the accuracy of Sherlock's conclusion. But arriving at the right conclusion is an easy matter for the fictional detective, as the narrative deck is always stacked in their favour. When determining the quality of a fictional detective, it's more important to zero in on how the detective arrived at their solution, rather than focusing on the solution itself.
Most enlightening.
So far, we've barely mentioned Miss Marple, but this is consistent with character.
And one has to ask oneself why.
In contrast to Sherlock, she hides her penetrating intelligence behind an unassuming, amiable appearance. While Sherlock is often forced to use clever disguises, Marple blends into the background by leveraging the assumptions of others.
Don't judge a book by its cover, Mr. Gaskell. I assure you I never do.
She often encounters people who superficially see her as a spinster, lonely, nosy and harmless. This routine underestimation allows Marple to approach a case diagonally, and catches even law enforcement by surprise. Before they know it, she has her hand on the tiller and is directing the course of the investigation.
I wouldn't dream of suggesting what you should do.
Marple's ability to hide in plain sight is just one quality that makes her an effective detective.
Miss Marple.
Good afternoon, Mr. Pye.
Her genteel and shrewd sociability make her an easy ally. Sherlock may have a network of informants, but Miss Marple has something he's short on: actual friends.
He's lying through her teeth.
As a result, Marple is often drawn into a case through these social contacts. But her friends do more than just jumpstart her sleuthing. She uses her relationships and connections to gain information and access.
Isn't she marvellous?
What may start as the sharing of village news with her neighbours can end up as an inquiry into human character.
All the same, there's been a lot of talk.
This village, St Mary Mead, may seem like inauspicious grounds for the examination of wickedness, but Marple intuits the psychological implications of the seemingly mundane. As she says, a tiny working model of a torpedo is just the same as a real torpedo. Marple's insights into St Mary Mead serve as templates for understanding hidden motives and desires.
Mr. Pye, I usually find the most likely people behaving exactly as I would have expected.
She understands that for every murder, there is a murderer. For Marple, you can only get to the truth of a crime through understanding the emotional landscape of the criminal. Marple is a master of intuition. Her method of investigation slowly circles her suspects and their circumstances, taking in linked but disparate facts, experiences and feelings that form an interconnected picture of the case. Marple's method of investigation shouldn't be unfamiliar to us. We constantly, and often unconsciously, use patterns of speech, movement and action combined with a background understanding of social context to understand each other. Marple harnesses these everyday abilities and leverages them to catch criminals. To take a closer look at Marple's methodology, let's examine the way she teases out two essential clues from the body in the library.
Little Tommy Timson had much the same idea. Rather a sensitive boy like yourself. He thought his teacher was always picking on him, so he put a frog in her drawer. A body, of course, is a somewhat more serious matter.
This vignette illustrates the way Marple uses St Mary Mead as a flexible reference base that orients how she approaches a case. In this instance, her memories of Tommy and the schoolmistress are grist for the mill of her analogical reasoning. By remembering analogous circumstances that fit the case's fact pattern, she drew valuable information that made sense of the seemingly inexplicable and cleared a possible suspect.
I was right.
The most important part of this method is its flexibility. Unlike Sherlock's brittle chain of reasoning, this allows her to double-check her own assumptions and view the case from a previously unseen perspective without her entire theory of the case collapsing. But this strength is also a weakness if Marple forces the factual circumstances of a case to fit with an analogy that doesn't suit the motivations behind a crime.
Are you sure?
Marple's methods demand finding the right parallel and not jumping to conclusions.
All you know about your neighbour is what they say of themselves.
As a result, she must operate in an atmosphere of investigative uncertainty. For this to work, Marple must walk an intellectual tightrope. She must allow for her own fallibility, but trust her insights into analogical experiences that could shed light on a case.
Well, you see, it was no dress. And if Ruby had changed in order to meet a boyfriend, which I believe is a current theory, why would she change into a no dress? She'd wear her best dress. Girls of Ruby's class always wear their best clothes, however unsuitable the occasion, so why didn't she stay as she was? In her best pink frock.
This is what makes Marple extraordinary. She is a master detective because she is a master of lived experience. Details beneath the notice of male investigators prove to be an essential clue for cracking the case. While Sherlock runs away from his everyday life through isolation or intoxication and only feels alive when he's on the case, for Marple, what's domestic and what's dramatic is a matter of perspective.
That, of course, would be the wrong question, wouldn't it? But please don't let me keep you.
Marple's method may not be as showy as Sherlock's, but like a master craftsman, she takes the humble materials of daily life and weaves them into solutions with all the elegance of a fable. So, when you think about what makes for an excellent detective, maybe it's time to consider putting down the pipe and picking up the knitting needles.